So go ahead, sit up straight.
Okay.
No turning in the seat.
All right.
So go ahead and look at the camera and introduce yourself.
I'm Laura Dobrindt. I teach kindergarten at Rockwell School. The lesson I did used the story Ant and the Grasshopper.
All right, and then I'm going to just try to monitor sound. So now you can look here for the actual interview process. And you can stop me at any time, but you know the drill. All right, so first question, we want to understand the decisions you made in planning for this lesson and how it fits into the unit and year. How does this lesson connect to and build on student skills, or how does this lesson connect to and build on students' prior skills and knowledge?
Can I break the question down?
Yeah.
Okay. So prior to this lesson, we've been working on retelling stories, sequencing stories, and we've also touched on author's message.
You want me to read the next part?
Is that what was taught before this?
What was taught before this lesson and what will come after it?
Okay, so I did what was taught before. Okay. A follow-up lesson that I'm planning on doing will be using the same text, Ant and Grasshopper. And we've been working on opinion writing, so I'm going to have the students decide whether they'd rather be an ant or a grasshopper, and they'll have to prove it using evidence from the text.
Okay. And then,
can I keep going?
Sure.
I'm also going to be using other fables, and I'll be having them do some reading, some close reading again, going back into the text, and we're going to discuss similarities with the text, some differences, and eventually we'll move into stories that don't have such a clear, eventually we're going to move into stories where the lesson isn't so clear, and the kids have to really do some thinking to figure out what the author was trying to say or what the lesson or moral to the story was.
Okay, good. So let me take a pause. And from the top, how does this lesson connect to and build on students' prior skills and knowledge?
Prior to this lesson, we've been working on story elements, sequencing stories, and discussing the message that a story contains.
What was taught before this lesson and what will come after it?
I'm going to follow up this lesson with a writing assignment that has to do with forming an opinion and writing about it. So the kids are going to have to decide if they would rather be an ant or a grasshopper, and they'll have to use evidence from the text to support their answer. I'm also going to be looking at other fables, and I'm going to have the kids compare and contrast and discuss messages and lessons. And eventually, we'll move into stories where the message or the lesson isn't so clear, and the kids are really going to have to infer what was written and come up with the big idea, message, or lesson independently.
You're going to kill me?
Why?
Because for some reason your audio is not... Again. Okay, so from the top, so I can remind myself, how does this lesson connect to and build on students' prior skills and knowledge?
Prior to the lesson I taught today, we've been working on story elements, sequencing a story, and discussing author's message.
You want me to ask the next? What was taught before the lesson and what will come after it?
Okay. After the lesson that I taught today, I'm going to use the same piece of text for a writing assignment. We've been working on developing an opinion and supporting it using evidence from the text. So they're going to have to write about, they're going to have to decide if they'd rather be an ant or a grasshopper and explain why using evidence from the text. I'm also going to continue with other fables, and we'll compare the fable we read today to the ones we read in the future. And eventually we'll move into stories where the message or the lesson isn't so clear, and the kids are really going to have to infer independently on their own. Okay.
Is the text used in this lesson part of a sequence of text designed to build skills and knowledge? If so, give an example of other texts that form this sequence.
Yes, this text was chosen specifically because it allows the kids to use what they've learned as far as character, setting, problem, solution, all the story elements. And it also is at a higher level. Typically they're reading at a DRA level 2 at this time of year, and I chose a piece of text that was a 10. So it is a little bit more challenging for them, and it had some richer vocabulary. When I read it the first time, we had to talk about the word future, the word wise, and just kind of go into the meaning of those words, because those words they don't typically see in books that are at their level. Is that okay?
Do your best. This is your
Okay.
time. All right, so talk about the standards targeted in this lesson. What did you do to make the lesson reflect the full intent of that standard?
Okay. The main standard that I addressed was with prompting and support. Students need to be able to ask and answer questions about key details in the text. So I chose a text that had some key details that they could certainly go back to and refer to. The reading foundational skills standards are sort of embedded in all of the lessons that I do, just as far as modeling, reading left to right, looking at words, sounding them out, figuring out syllables. And they also had to confirm their understanding of the text through a read aloud. They had to answer questions and also discuss it with their peers.
You are doing awesome. You're doing it. Which of the core action indicators do you think this lesson best exemplifies, and why?
I chose 2. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay. I think that this lesson exemplifies core action 1, just because the high quality text, a lot of thought went into the text that I chose for this lesson. And as far as core action 2, employ questions and tasks that are text specific, that was pretty much the big idea of my lesson today. I wanted my kids to understand that when they read something and they answer a question, they have to be able to go back and prove it. And not only is that a good skill as far as the core and the standards that we're trying to teach, but even just in life, when someone gives you some information, you want to be able to go back and not just take the information that's given to you. You want to be able to find it out for yourself and get some proof.
We're interested in how the shifts required by the CCSS are being incorporated into your instruction. Discuss how this lesson illustrates the shifts required by the CCSS.
Okay, so the shifts that are required by the CCSS are incorporated into this lesson because they were reading and writing, and it was, can I start again because I looked down way too much?
That's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, you look fine to me. So.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, discuss how this lesson illustrates the shift. So this lesson illustrates the shifts in the CCSS because the reading, the writing, and the responding were all grounded in using evidence from the text in the children's answers and responses. The text that I chose was fiction, but when I read it the first time through, we did discuss whether it was fiction or nonfiction because it did use real photographs. So the children initially, some of them, thought, oh, real photographs, it must be nonfiction. But we kind of had to look at it deeper and really pay attention to what the story was about. And, we had a really rich conversation that had to do with, just because it has real photographs, you have to read the story. And if it has characters, oh, it must be fiction. And it was a good conversation. There was a lot of back and forth discourse with the kids. So while it wasn't a nonfiction piece, we did have a discussion that had to do with nonfiction.
Good. How did you teach the content of this lesson or this text prior to the CCSS? What is the same and what is different?
Prior to the CCSS, I probably would have gravitated towards a piece of text that was at their current reading level, which is, like I said earlier, a DRA 2, just because I knew they could read it. So with the shifts, I definitely chose something that was higher level and trickier for them. They couldn't read a lot of it independently, but reading it over and over again helps them become more familiar with it. So that's something that was a little different also. I'm going to use this text for a variety of lessons. It's going to be around for a long time, which I think will really help the kids to really understand the story and understand how you could do so much with just one piece of literature or text.
Okay. Student engagement is crucial to the work of the CCSS. We want to understand how you ensure that all students have the opportunity to productively engage in the work of the lesson. How did you support all students in working with grade level text? For example, how do you provide scaffolding for students below grade level so they can read grade level text?
Okay. For my student who's reading above grade level, the worksheet that she was working on actually didn't have any picture support, which the other students did. There was picture support to help them to understand the question and the choices that they had. So that's how hers was a little bit different. For my kids who were struggling, I had some students come up and actually circle the text with me, and I had, the way I chose my students, I did scaffold how they came up. So the first student who came up could probably do it a little more independently, and then I'd have another student come up who had a harder time, but they could sort of rely on what their peer did, so that they felt confident, they were participating, and they were engaged in the lesson.
How do you know the students were able to successfully respond to the text-dependent How did you know the students were able to successfully respond to the text-dependent questions and tasks with precision?
Based on the application assignment that I gave them, that worksheet, I could see that the students were successful, and they all responded successfully. I also was able to tell based on the answers they told me orally and what they shared with their peers.
Did the students acquire the literary skills addressed in this lesson? What did you do for the students who did not acquire the literary skills?
Did I? I don't even have that question right now.
You can skip
Okay.
it if you want. Okay, you're fine. Moving on here.
My next one is which behaviors.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. Which behaviors from Core Action 3 did the students best exemplify in this lesson? What actions have you taken as a teacher to make that happen?
Okay. All students had to complete the application assignment, and they also were able to discuss the questions and their answers with a peer. We've been working with older students, actually, a second grade classroom, on just having good, smart conversations, listening to each other, making sure that not only are you listening, but you're hearing and understanding what your partner's saying, being able to share it back. So I was really pleased with how they did as far as that aspect of the lesson. And their listening and speaking skills were also very appropriate, and I think they were very successful.
Great instructors are continuously learning. We want to understand what you celebrated in this lesson and what you would improve upon. Reflecting on the lesson, what worked well and what might you do differently?
I was pleased with how I could see that they took what was previously taught and they were able to apply it to the work today. I was also pleased with how they interacted with each other and how they did share and how they understood that they had to go back to the text. As far as some behaviors, they are 5. So overall, I was really pleased, and they did all successfully complete the assignment. I might switch some seats next time. That's kind of an ongoing process in my classroom. No one ever stays in the same place for very long. So that's something I would work on for next time.
And were there any surprises or unexpected student behaviors or reactions?
Not really.
That's fine.
Okay.
That's an answer. So go ahead again, look at the camera. Why don't you give me, I'm going to pause this for a minute. So go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Laura Dobrindt. I teach kindergarten at Rockwell School, and my lesson today involved the text ant and grasshopper.